This episode of Unqualified Opinions is brought to you by Hirechain. Your next hire could come from anywhere: a recruiter, a job board, a referral network, or conference. Hirechain manages hundreds of candidate sources for you, so you only see relevant applications and can focus on picking the best person for your team. On average, our customers fill open roles faster and 30% cheaper than with traditional recruiters. Leading companies like The Graph and Messari already use Hirechain. So get your time back. Talk to Hirechain today and hire the best, fast. Visit hirechain.io/Messari for prioritized onboarding. This podcast is meant for informational purposes only and is not meant to serve as investment advice. Hosts and guests may hold cryptocurrencies discussed in this episode. Opinions expressed may not reflect the opinions of Messari.
We're now more than halfway through 2024, and on a macro level, to be honest, most of us at Messari Research aren't really sure what to make of crypto this year. Bitcoin is up 50% and the ETFs are launched, but there's been no breakthrough above all-time highs, and the runes, ordinals, layer 2 narratives have quieted down. ETH is also up and the ETFs are flowing, but there hasn't been any new explosive narrative or use case that expands the crypto pie. Solana is also up in price and its fundamentals are showing huge growth, but alts in general aren't doing that well. Meme coin mania is somewhat slowing and it still faces some technical issues. So we step back and took stock of where each of the three crypto majors are at and what narratives we think might drive crypto for the rest of 2024. I'm Seth Bloomberg, and here's the story.
Messari's annual conference Mainnet returns this fall, September 30th through October 2nd. Now in its fourth year, Mainnet is the largest annual crypto event in New York, featuring leaders from crypto, Wall Street, and Washington. Join 3,000 attendees this year to hear from leaders like Kathy Wood, Hester Peirce, and Chris Dixon talk about what's in store for this year, 2025, and beyond. We'll cover the explosion of real-world assets on-chain, the industry's physical infrastructure, the codependent relationship of crypto and AI, the continued growth of smart contract platforms, acceleration of institutional products. We've got it all. Mainnet's your opportunity to meet hundreds of projects shaping the future of crypto and the institutional investors and capital allocators helping fuel their development. You can enjoy a 20% discount using discount code MessariPod when registering at mainnet.events. Interested in a prominent presence at this year's Mainnet? Snag a meeting room or a booth and contact events at Messari.io to explore all Mainnet has to offer.
Yeah, Seth, so we've been doing these Friday discussion reports for a while. They've been really fun. Every week, on Monday, we come up with a topic. Explain why the team wanted to write this report.
Yeah, the Friday discussion pieces are always fun. They're typically more of like a timely, almost like an event-driven or some kind of reaction to a current narrative or some kind of storyline. But I think as we were talking in our team call, like you mentioned, we're kind of like talking through the majors there that we mentioned, Bitcoin, Ethereum, and Solana, and we all I think agreed on maybe some bullishness for each of those assets in the shorter term, but there's a lot of different narratives that are kind of spinning around each of those. So given that it is like somewhat, middle-ish of this year, it just felt like a good time to kind of, look at where each of those are at, and then just give our takes on how strong each of those are looking, and then what the rest of the year looks like for those majors. So that's kind of where it came from.
So if you were to set the scene for each of these three assets, what is the scoop?
Yeah. So maybe I'll just even even zoom out even further from just these assets and just think about crypto in general. So I think this is there's kind of 3 points I guess I have here are just the bullishness we have as a team. So one is just the U.S. economy. So we talk about this a little bit in the piece. I think Dylan does this, but maybe there's like some kind of general consensus that rate cuts are incoming for the U.S. And that's, typically positive for crypto assets, or if nothing else, probably just Bitcoin alone. So there's always uncertainty there. But I think there's fairly broad consensus that's going to happen at some point this year. So that's kind of like reason one for just, bullishness. The second is, again, US focused, but on the politics and kind of regulatory front. So even though it seems maybe at this point, each candidate is sort of coming around to crypto to some degree. Trump is definitely, leading the pack, I guess, on the crypto, the pro crypto stance. So he's done this numerous times, verbally at events, being pro crypto, and even on the platform side, he showed pro crypto tendencies. So, and he's leading the pack right now, obviously in the U.S. election cycle. Just a lot of good positive signals there, and then maybe like the latest thing on that side of things is this strategic Bitcoin reserve. That's obviously a huge positive signal that not only Trump has come out saying, but there's other prominent politicians coming out and saying this as well. So you kind of take all that together, and it's just a lot of positive activity coming for crypto and Bitcoin in particular there too. If you think like a strategic Bitcoin reserve for the US, that just sounds crazy that we're seriously talking about that right now. Even just a few months ago, definitely like a year ago, that would just be nonsensical. So those are kind of the first two bullets. And then the third is on like the traditional finance side with ETFs. So Bitcoin got its ETFs rolling this year. In general, the flows have been positive. Maybe people are always going to want more, I suppose. And that also applies to the ETH ETF, even though it just got started. But Bitcoin getting its flows going, ETH just getting started, maybe some disappointment there. I don't know on kind of day one-ish flows from some folks. But in general, I think, especially on the ETH side, that was a surprise to the upside, I guess, for ETH, right? A lot of folks had that kind of pegged to not happen this year, at least. And there was a lot of surprise, I think, when it did happen. And so in general, those flows are positive, and ETH even looks like it's kind of working through some issues more quickly on the ETF side than it needs to get through. So yeah, I think those are the three like bigger kind of picture things of why we kind of sensed the team is sort of bullish all around for the rest of this year.
Now let's go into the details for each of those assets. Ethereum is dealing with an identity crisis.
Yeah. So if you kind of look at the piece, Sonny lays this out fairly well as far as the identity crisis that Ethereum might be facing. When you look at it from like it's how it thinks about itself as an asset, and then like market buyers as well. I think I largely agree with that right now. I always kind of like think of it as being squeezed in between Bitcoin and Solana, as far as I think about it, and like have a nice simple mental model for what Ethereum, the asset, is. So it's sort of historically been, ETH the asset. With Ethereum, the network's roll-up centric roadmap is we're going to export this asset out to all of these networks. They're going to use it as, basically money, collateral within their DeFi ecosystems. And I think that's largely played out. If you look at the data, that's to a large degree true, but it's also fairly intangible as far as how you want to rate that and like assign some kind of value to it. And there's also this sort of looming like, okay, a lot of these L2s also want to build their own ecosystems with networks building on top of them, like L3s. And what does that mean for Ethereum in that world? And that world's still a little bit off, but that will be something that'll have to be dealt with at some point. But probably like the biggest one that's caused the most concern with ETH, and as far as how it thinks about itself as an asset, is the semi-recent Ethereum Mainnet upgrade, which was Dan Kuhn. So Dan Kuhn introduced a few different features or upgrades to Ethereum. One of them was EIP 4844, and we've covered this in various contexts at Messari. But the general idea is that before 4844, if you're in L2, you need to publish your data, your network's data, and you do that on Ethereum mainnet, and you use this stuff called call data, which is like a particular way to store data, and it's relatively expensive to use that. And that's been one of the main operating expenses, if you will, for like an L2 or a rollup, has been paying to publish data onto Ethereum mainnet. So with 4844, it effectively created an entire new market for storing data or publishing data onto Ethereum. It separated it out into these things called blobs, which is basically just like this very generic storage area for L2s to publish data. Technically, anybody can use that, but the primary purpose is to kind of offload this data availability, or DA, onto these blobs. And the fee market for those blobs is very, very cheap. Now where it used to, maybe you could say like extract a lot of value from these L2s from in a fee perspective from the DA solution that it has. Well, that's been reduced dramatically, and it's effectively now getting negligible fees from these L2s. So that's caused some concern. I think it's a little bit short-sighted. This is exactly, I think, what if you just looked at the data, even prior to 4844, I think both sides of this make sense. It would get cheaper for L2s to transact, and Ethereum mainnet would kind of like lower its fee capture, which obviously affects things like the burn, which Ethereum folks don't like to see that get negatively impacted. But yeah, I think 4844 has caused a lot of maybe like recent concerns on Ethereum's positioning relative to L2s and even like other L1s like Solana. So I think that's sort of like a good capture of Ethereum's identity crisis.
Okay, so let's move on to Bitcoin, right? So as you said at the beginning of the call, it feels like the whole narrative around Bitcoin programmability has quieted down a little bit. So what's in stock for Bitcoin?
Yeah, I'll lean a little bit into Dylan's takes on this. He wrote some great words here on this. So maybe like he said, the L2 ecosystem has calmed down a little bit on for Bitcoin, and I think primarily that's somewhat expected in my view, because you have these funding announcements. There was some like initial technical work that sort of came out for bringing these technical solutions to Bitcoin. Then it needed to act as like a settlement layer, like grow its L2 ecosystem, and all that happened, and it caused excitement and hype. Teams got funded to build things, and now I think the hope is they're building the things and building products that people are going to use. And maybe it is quiet for a bit, and maybe some of this was sort of a flash in the pan, but there is like these small pockets of real things happening, I would say. So I expect that to come back at some point, but it definitely has quieted down. And that's why I wanted like the L2 ecosystem things, but also the runes and the ordinals and these kind of NFT-ish assets. And that also falls in line with pretty much every other NFT ecosystem out there. So that's kind of been the things that have slowed down, I would say, for Bitcoin. On the other side, I think it's strongly outweighed by more positive factors. So Dylan kind of sets this up as looking back all the way to FTX in November 2022, which feels like a lifetime ago at this point. But yeah, it was hit lows of around $15 1,000 at that time. There's a lot of concern just in general in the crypto ecosystem. Still felt a bit existential, I guess, as an entire asset class. And then, kind of fast forward, lots of positive activity has happened. Bitcoin has kind of found this range of maybe 55 to 60K up to 70K, and it's sort of ranged in there. While it did surpass all-time highs, it hasn't just kind of blown off the top there. So that's kind of the price action, I suppose. And then just on the traditional finance, kind of larger markets out there, Bitcoin has an ETF, it has good flows. BlackRock, Larry Fink are, big proponents of Bitcoin at this point. So yeah, I think there's just a ton of positive things you can point to on the Bitcoin side, as far as where it's at right now. So maybe too, I would say just because of how well established Bitcoin is at this point, and relative to Ethereum, it doesn't quite need to conjure up these identities that Ethereum is sort of cycling through and trying to get the stick. I think that's the trend that you might see too with Ethereum over time, but Bitcoin is solidified, and it's sort of just, it doesn't need these narratives or these identities anymore. The flows sort of speak for themselves. In the TradFi markets, these are financial products that need to be sold, just like many other financial products. And I see that continuing too. And I think that's sort of what Dylan lays out here as well.
Let's move on to Solana. Last but not least, Solana has been knocking out of the park in terms of excitement, price performance. It feels like it has a clear identity as an ultra low latency blockchain that is meant to bring scale to crypto. Talk me through how the team is thinking about Solana.
Yeah, I think Solana might be the one where there still is a little bit of maybe fractured opinion as far as what the future holds within our team. Maybe just some points to pull out of the report that we wrote. I think Sunny had some good perspectives on this. As far as the buyers, Solana is in this nice position where it does have this retail activity, which we'll speak to in just a second. But it is also it's a very large, by market cap coin at this point, which means it's one of the few liquid assets that can be bought in size. Then on the other side, like I was just speaking to on the retail side, it's clearly dominating the retail side. I think even maybe a few months ago, or maybe towards the beginning of the year, the thing you kind of look for with retail adoption is the Coinbase app rising in the App Store rankings. And I think a lot of that was taken over by the Phantom wallet, which it does have access to these other ecosystems and networks, but it's very well associated with Solana. So you kind of saw a shift there, which was interesting. And then just again on the retail side with meme coins, which are still running, and I kind of use Pom.Fun as a proxy to look at meme coin activity, and it's still raking in fees every week. And yeah, it's just Solana's just kind of become this home for meme coin activity, and it is still it is very PVT, which can be good or bad, however you look at that. But what it is doing is generating a lot of economic activity. Solana's well positioned there. It's integrated. Its whole goal is to keep scaling its network and not explicitly push things out to the edges, like Ethereum's rollup centric roadmap is. So I think that's all positive for it. Maybe the one thing you could kind of point to, kind of the other side of the coin is meme coins are PvP. It seems like the market should get tired and fatigued of that at some point. It just hasn't really played out yet. So yeah, there's still not this kind of killer application, if you will, that that's been adopted by the masses, maybe in like a social sense. So that still hasn't taken off. So maybe that's that's a few areas around Solana that are both positive and maybe something to keep an eye on in the future too. There on the meme coin side.
Just to wrap things up, right? What is the one thing you'll be looking for the rest of the year in crypto?
Yeah, it's a good question. I still think Ethereum probably has the most like murkiness or clouds around it. So I think it could make for the most interesting to see how it sort of comes out on the other side, or what things start to disappear and what becomes a little bit more solidified or clear. So that's probably the area that I'll be looking the most on the narrative side. Again, I think Bitcoin and Solana have these very clear pictures moving forward. So I'm not sure really what can shake those up. But yeah, I mean, Ethereum side in particular, I am interested to see if this, I kind of called it like this revival of like bring scaling back to Ethereum, the base layer. So I'm interested to see if that can, continue to get adoption by, this kind of like these different groups of folks in Ethereum, right? There's sort of like these research, almost academic focused themes. And then there's just, retail participants. There's other, traditional finance and just finance firms that are also interested in this, I think, at this point. So yeah, seeing how teams deal with that and the implications that has for rollups and how Ethereum competes with other smart contract platforms like a Solana, that to me is going to be the most interesting to see how it plays out.
Yeah, I agree. I think one thing that's interesting to me is, it will be also to see, like you said, how some of these institutional participants that are going to be buying in to the ETF, what narrative they will be picking up on.
Yeah, I agree. I saw I think I put this in the piece too, like Bitwise, has this chart on its transaction count on Ethereum's ecosystem. So they're they're be looking at the chart. It's like these vertical bar charts of, it's like Ethereum, and then it's like zk-Sync, Arbitrum Base, Optimism, all kind of put together. So they're very clearly, to me, that's they're thinking of us Ethereum as this like single cohesive set of networks, these L2s and rollups that all combine to like make this Ethereum thing. So there is no, I think that kind of paints the picture of like this unified network and kind of like rejects this, rollups are parasitic or net negative against Ethereum base layer. So yeah, I think that will probably be the, if I was trying, if I was someone in their shoes, that's probably the way I would want to look at Ethereum as well. So I expect other participants to view it that way as well.
Well, thank you very much.
This episode was produced by Steve Bichimer, based on the report Living in Interesting Times, written for Messari Pro by myself, Kunal, and Sunny in July 2024. To keep up with where our research team thinks the crypto market is headed, please consider subscribing to Messari Pro at messari.io.